Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation of my thesis titled When Personalization Undermines the Self. Existential meaning orientation as a boundary condition in AI driven consumer decision making. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through the central idea of my doctoral research, the key findings that emerge from it, and why they matter in a world where AI is becoming an increasingly active part of everyday decision making. I would like to begin with a simple question. What happens when technology becomes so good at understanding us that it starts to feel a little too personal? That is the question of the heart of my doctoral research. Today, AI helps us decide what to buy, what to wear, what to watch, and even how to care for ourselves. These systems are designed to make decisions easier by offering relevant and personalized recommendations. In many situations, they actually do that. There's another side to the story. Not every choice is purely practical. Some choices carry personal meaning. They reflect our values, our identity, and sometimes even the sense of self. And when AI enters such decisions, people do not always respond positively. A recommendation may be accurate and yet still not feel right. My thesis explores exactly this tension. When does AI personalization feel useful, and when does it begin to feel like it's crossing a line? To address this question, we introduce the concept of existential meaning orientation or EMO. In simple terms, EMO refers to how much people see their choices as meaningful. Some consumers approach decisions mainly in practical terms, focusing on its usefulness, efficiency, and convenience. Others experience even ordinary choices as an expression of their identity, values, and purpose. For these consumers, choosing is not only about selecting the best option, it is also about feeling that the choice reflects the self. And this distinction becomes especially important when AI becomes part of the decision process. Across six experimental studies with more than 1,900 participants, we examined how consumers respond to AI driven recommendations in contexts such as skincare, fashion, wellness, and finance. These contexts does differ, but they all involve decisions that may carry a personal meaning. One of the findings and the crux of it from study one was that personalization can backfire when consumers feel excluded from the act of choosing. When AI presents one best option and leaves little room for exploration, same consumers, some consumers react negatively. This is especially true for people high in EMO. Even when the recommendation appears to be relevant, it may feel less satisfying to them because the consumer does not feel involved in arriving at it. So the issue is not only whether the answer or the recommendation is correct, it is whether the decision still feels like my decision. That's very important. And a second important finding is that consumers do not all experience personalization in the same way. Some consumers' usefulness is enough. If the recommendation works, that is sufficient. But for others, usefulness alone is not enough. They also care whether the recommendation feels aligned with who they are, whether the recommendation reflects their values, and whether it leaves room for personal authorship. And as a result, the same AI system may feel efficient to one person and uncomfortable to others. This is why we argue that personalization is not just a technical issue, it is also a psychological and a human one. Our research also shows that how AI communicates matters just as much as what it recommends or what it communicates. One part of the study, that is in study three, we could see that identity signaling language in a recommendation can create discomfort. When an AI speaks as though it fully understands who you are, some consumers may experience this as an overreach rather than a support. Instead of feeling understood, they may feel that the system is being intrusive. For consumers who see their choices as deeply meaningful, this reduces the authenticity and lowers the willingness to follow their recommendation. In other words, personalization may fail not just because it's inaccurate, but it feels psychologically misaligned and intrusive. At the same time, our findings are not all against AI. In fact, they point to a more constructive path forward. Particularly encouraging result is that consumers respond more positively when AI is framed as a guide rather than an authority. When a system reminds users that they remain in control or presents recommendations as support rather than instruction, people respond with greater trust and comfort. The recommendation feels less imposed and more collaborative. This suggests that better AI is not only about making smarter predictions, it is also about preserving human agency. And in study 5, we examined regret based persuasive messages. It's a nudging technique used by most of the marketers. So it's messages that try to push action. But such language is very common in digital environments and used for increasing the sales. But our findings suggest that this strategy can be risky. For consumers who experience decisions as identity relevant, regret based messages can feel pressurizing rather than helpful. Instead of creating compliance, they may create resistance and even delay. So, pressure does not always strengthen persuasion. In some cases, it weakens it. And finally, in study 6, our thesis shows that AI can recover from a poor recommendation when it is able to adapt. Because when a system visibly learns from the consumer's feedback and adjusts its output, consumers respond more favorably. This is especially important for meaning oriented individuals when the AI appears to learn with the user rather than simply act on the user. It restores confidence and makes the interaction feel more respectful and more authentic. Taken together, these findings lead to one broad conclusion. A personalization works best when it supports people without taking away the meaning of choosing for themselves. So that is the heart of the thesis. And this thesis makes three main contributions. First, it introduces EMO as a new way of understanding why consumers respond differently to AI personalization. Second, it shows the key issue is not only whether AI predicts accurately, but whether it follows people to feel authentic, respected, and in control while making the decisions. Third, it identified design conditions that improve the personalization experience, including preserving the choice, avoiding intrusive identity claims, affirming the autonomy, and feedback, adapting after feedback. So these findings have important implications for business. Many firms assume that more personalization is necessarily better. Our work suggests that this is not always the case. If personalization becomes too directive or too psychologically forceful, it may reduce trust rather than strengthen it. So the implications also extend beyond business as AI becomes more embedded in areas such as wellness, finance, education. We need to ask a larger question. The question is, can algorithms assist people effectively without diminishing their sense of agency in decisions that matter to them? And this is why this research matters. At one level, it contributes to the consumer behavior and marketing. At the other level, it speaks to a broader challenge how to design AI systems that remain helpful and intelligent while still keeping the human person at the center of the meaningful decision making. So, the core message of my doctoral work is that the future of personalization should not only be smarter, it should also be more human. And before I conclude, I would like to acknowledge with gratitude and support to my faculty members. I sincerely thank my REC chairperson, Professor Srijish S., area member, Professor Tarun Kashilinga, cross area member, Professor M.K. Nandakumar, and TC chair, Professor Joshi Joseph, and other anonymous examiners. I'm deeply grateful for their time, guidance, and encouragement throughout my doctoral journey. And thank you so much for listening.